we're here today. So held annually on March 31st, International Transgender Day of Visibility is a time to celebrate the accomplishments and victories of transgender and gender non-conforming people and raise awareness around discrimination and violence that trans people experience. This series, hosted by Georgia State Multicultural Center, will amplify the urgent needs of the community that is deeply impacted by racism, sexism, transphobia, and an epidemic of violence against the transgender and non-binary people. In honor of Trans Day of Visibility, we have with us for our Storytellers event, Miss Jodie Patterson, activist and author of The Bold World, a memoir of family and transformation, and Born Ready, the true story of a boy named Penelope. Jodie will share her story on mothering 5 diverse children and raising a trans child in a bold world. Our conversation will explore identity, gender, race, advocacy, and progressive parenting. Patterson has been lauded for her activist work by Hillary Clinton, The Advocate, Family Circle, Essex, Cosmopolitan, and Yahoo, among others. She currently holds the position of chair of the board of the Human Rights Campaign Foundation and advises Mount Sinai's Hospital's Gender Center as well as the Ackerman Institute's Gender and Family Project. She is a sought after public speaker addressing a wide range of audiences about identity, gender, parenting, beauty, and entrepreneurship. And without further ado, I introduce to some and present to others Ms. Jodie Patterson.
Shanisa, thank you so much for
Yes.
that thorough introduction. Sometimes when I hear all of the places I've been and things that I've done most recently, when I listen to it, it means something to me. It doesn't go lost on my own ears, because where I am today at 50 is quite different from where I was 10 years ago. And so thank you for putting that out. Thank you for reminding me how we evolve, even the 40-year-old, even the 50-year-old. Um, and I'm just so happy to be here talking with you today about everything you just mentioned: gender, race, family, dynamics, being a woman.
Thank you for joining us. And believe you me, you are helping us all. You're changing the world.
Hmm.
Okay. So before we get into the conversation, I just want to kind of set some ground rules for everyone that is participating. So this is an open forum, but we respect each other's thoughts and opinions. I would like for us to listen to understand, speak from your own experience, and make sure we give everyone equal speaking time by sharing the mic.
You sound like me at the dinner table.
Yeah.
That's what I say to my family. Like, we don't have to agree on
Yes,
everything, but let's just talk. Let's have an open conversation, and let's talk about the hard stuff. If the places where
yes.
we don't agree is interesting to me. So I welcome this diverse conversation with you.
Thank you so much. So I guess we'll just get right into it. Of course, we all know you wear many hats as an activist, an author, mother, and chair of the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. Can you tell us more about your story and how you acquired those many hats?
Well, I can't say precisely how I ended up being this 50-year-old woman. But I do know that today I insert myself in places that I wouldn't have dared, like I said, 10 years ago. A lot of what I think a lot of that comes from an intentional act of untethering. And that's a complicated statement, but I think it's in particular for women and for mothers, the act of untethering is counterintuitive. I was taught, and many of my female friends and many girls and women are taught to stay close to home, to stay close to your children, stay close to your spouse, stay close to your morals, stay close to your beliefs. And so for many years, I did just that. Um, but throughout my life, I've noticed myself untethering from um, ideals and untethering from convention. And I'll say that, I want to say that to say it's not just today that I'm an advocate. I've been sort of, moving through life and experiencing things. And I was raised by advocates. And I was raised by people who said, try things out, do things differently, break the status quo. The background of my family is I come from activists. My grandmother was a Southern activist. Martin Luther King dubbed her Ms. Revolution for the work she did in the civil rights era. My father started the first Black brokerage firm on Wall Street. My uncle is Gil Scott-Heron, the musician who wrote The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So I come from people who challenged. And so that gave me a drive for life. I've been in music, I've been in fashion, I've been in nightlife, I've been in the beauty industry. And those were all about experiencing passion and moving the culture for me forward. But there was a moment in my life where even my own activism or my own approach to life was challenged. And that was when my child at 3 said, "Mama, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy." Mm-hmm. And although I had an understanding of inequality, of racial divide, of wage gap, I never thought of gender in the same way. So when you ask me how I got here, I don't know. It was a long time in the making, but my eyes were open, and my child challenged me. And so now, there's so much I can say in that question, like how did you get to this point? But I think what it was when I realized that I had not fully seen my child. Mm-hmm. I thought I had seen the whole world. I thought I was eyes wide open, but when I didn't see my own son and his reality, it made me think, well, what else in this world haven't I seen? And I went deeper into exploring the world, the people as they are, not as I want them to be. And that really brought me to this position in my life where I want to be in conversations around change, conversations around exploring our blind spots. And so the work that I do with the Human Rights Campaign, which is our largest LGBT organization, is about advocating for people who are the most marginalized and bringing resources and protection to those people. My work that I do with the hospitals and the work that I do with the other family organizations is about that same thing. Where are we most in need and trying to go there? Basically, I'm just mothering. I'm mothering everywhere I go.
And that's interesting that you say that, because like you said, Penelope is who pushed you down this road that you're going. And as a mother, as I was reading the book, and I'm pretty sure you can agree, I said, it's amazing how we're adults and we're the parents, but sometimes our children teach us and put us exactly where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people assume that I am the mother I am today because of my son, Penel, who is transgender. And what I say is, I think Penel urged me to bring out everything that I had in me, all of my experiences from the Black women who raised me, all of my experiences from the activists who I looked up to, all of my experiences from Spelman College that made me intellectually sharp and emotionally compassionate. I was forced to pull up on all of the things inside of me to address something that I did not understand. And so, I'm a mother with a capital M. I take my job of mothering seriously. And I think it's mothering inside the home, but mothering outside of the home too. And my children reminded me of that. When I go into the boardroom, I speak to them as I speak to my family at the dinner table, about compassion, about conflict resolution, about hearing people out, about allowing for all the voices. So, I do mother wherever I go. And I learned a lot of I experienced a lot more compassion from my kids. We are all so diverse that I had to really deepen my commitment to mothering just to keep the family together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what gets your point across, again, like you said, because you make everyone feel like family. You bring us all along. When I read your book, I felt like I was going through the motions with you. You do a great job of bringing the reader along on your journey so vividly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of I don't know if there are any writers out there, but if there are, you'll know what I mean. When we start to write, something like a memoir or even poetry or a thought, it forces us to go deeper into memory, things that we have pushed down for a while. And so as I was writing The Bold World, I was reminding myself of these small moments that have made me the woman I am, right? So I could remember moments of pain, moments of beauty, and it helped me to put all the pieces together to address this moment, right? So the story, The Bold World, is my story. It's a story of this woman who transforms and shifts for a child, but then transforms and shifts for myself, and then helps, my community transform and shift for the betterment of the community. But all of that, how we shift, how I learned to shift, came from my parents and my grandparents, I have to say. It wasn't, sometimes people think that what I'm doing right now, advocating for my son who's trans, is something that that most people are not capable of doing. And I always remind people, particularly Black people, that we've been shifting and redefining and claiming our own from the very beginning of time here. And we all can do this.
Yes, you are definitely right. But you just make it seem so easy.
Well, it's like I'm looking in the chat and someone reminded me of the story that I told in the book, Hair is Love. So
Mhm.
there were many moments in my family's history where my mother reminded us how to appreciate ourselves. One of the things she did was she made us stand in front of the mirror with just a t-shirt on and look at our bodies full length and hug ourselves and say, I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. So many times that we would start laughing. But we did this all the time, and we had an appreciation for ourselves bare. She also made us brush our hair and talk about how much we loved our hair. Hair is love in my family. So a lot of places where we find fault in our bodies and in our hair, my family has nurtured that self-love. And so I wanted to bring that to my family. Of course, we have difficult times, but I hope that my family at least understands that this family is love. It is based in love.
I think they do it. And as a reader, and I'm pretty sure for people who know you, that just oozes out of you love. That's what it's about at the end of the day. And speaking of your books, you have two books.
Okay.
And I want you to tell us about both and why they were so important for you to write.
Well, I studied literature at Spelman. And so I've always been focused on writing. Even before college, I've looked back at my notebooks and I've, notated all my life, things I've seen, quotes that I've heard, experiences. And so I've always been compelled to write. And by the time I was a mother of five, I had a lot to say, but it was sort of swimming around in my head. And then by the time my son at 3 years old said, Mama, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, there was a lot of noise in my head, I'll say. And so part of writing the book for me was to understand myself and to clear my own head and to tell the story the way I wanted it to tell the story in my truth. So at the time, this was about 10 years ago, that Penelope, my son, first told me I'm a boy. And that was a different time from now. Even though everyone doesn't understand transgender reality, that time we didn't have Janet Mock, we didn't have the TV show Pose. And so there was confusion on my end. What does this mean if my child is not my daughter, but my son? And the way that I could process that was to write about it and to write about it with love and truth. So the first book, The Bold World, is my story about this cisgender woman trying to see parts of the world that I'd never seen before, right? Trying to understand my transgender son, trying to understand gender nonconformity, trying to understand my own privilege as a cisgender woman, right? So I wrote the story about my life, about my journey, and how I transformed. And it's a very adult book, and a lot of parents have read it and they said, oh my God, I can't wait to share this with my kids. And I'm like, maybe you don't want to share it with your 3-year-old. It's not, because it gives you I don't hold back on my life. And you'll see if you read the book, the ups and downs and the twists and turns and the decisions I've made to explore areas of life, right? And many of the areas I explored were not PG. So when I started hearing from parents that they wanted a book for their children, I decided to write a book with my children about the child experience, the child language, the child perception of how families can shift for the ones they love. So The Bold World is an adult understanding of me and my shift, and Born Ready is a child's understanding of shift for them. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thank you for writing, those books, because I think in the book is you give that voice for parents who don't understand. And now this new book is to introduce the idea to children.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of our kids have, they have language that we don't encourage. They have thoughts that we don't support. And in the end, we end up silencing a lot of a lot of their own voice. And so I
Mhm.
saw that because, my family was really busy. I was a busy mom of many. I was working, dad was busy working. And my son Pennell got lost in that because he was different. I didn't understand some of his differences. And that was becoming problematic. When we don't see someone else, that creates a gap between us. And I'll say this, oftentimes we are blind to the other life, right? So the dominant culture does not really see the non-dominant culture. So white folks don't fully see Black folks, rich folks don't fully see poor folks, and cisgender people like myself don't fully see queer people or gender nonconforming people. Straight people don't understand the queer life, not fully. And that became a problem in my life because my own son, I didn't see him. And then come to find out, it's not just my son, it's millions of people right in the world. And so I just made it a mission to, once I realized that I had a huge blind spot, not only for my child, but for a big chunk of life, I was disappointed in myself. And so I really wanted to know more. I consider myself a smart person, a caring person. But if you're only seeing a fraction of the world, what are you really doing? And so my mission was to understand more and to see more. And as a writer, that process of writing the book um, challenged me. It really challenged me.
Yeah, and like I said, I just commend you so much because there was a lot that I've learned from reading this book. But the way you didn't just put one foot in, you went in with both feet to do research and to find out, you know, for not only for yourself, but like you said, for your child, because as you state, your child's life depended on it,
Mm. And I
and
don't
you
know how
went
many
full
people,
forward.
yeah. And I'm just going to say for the folks in the audience who might not know the full story, um, I'm a mother of five. I've been married twice, and my relationships have been very traditional. I was very nurturing of the children. My second husband at the time was the breadwinner. And I've always worked, I've been an entrepreneur, but we sort of stayed in our lanes. And by the time my third child was around two, we were experiencing a lot of anger and trauma in this child, crying all the time, nail biting, bedwetting, reoccurring nightmares. And this was a child that was born healthy and happy. But by the age of two, there were a lot of fights, a lot of screams. Um, and then eventually this child, Penelope, became a bully at home, on the playground, pushing siblings and protesting all the time. And this is more than just temper tantrums. As a mother of five, and this, temper tantrums, they mean very little, but this was something much heavier, and we could see it, especially in the nightmares. And so I was trying as a mother at this time to sort of fix the problem and see if I could adjust by like maybe longer naps, more love, a different diet. I thought maybe this is a dairy allergy. Trying to fix all the time, but nothing was getting better until one day when I asked my child Penelope, "What's really wrong, baby? Like, why are you so angry and so sad?" And that question, as opposed to fixing, that question opened up the conversation. And Penel said, "Mama, because everyone thinks I'm a girl and I'm not." I did not know what Penelope was saying. I didn't know the word transgender, but I did have a sense that Penelope was talking about something much bigger than I knew. And when you say I jumped in full force, Penelope and I talked for about an hour that day in the bedroom when Penelope said, "I'm not a girl." And I just listened. And when I said I was disappointed in myself, I was, because there was so much I had not known about what was going on in Penelope's head. And so I vowed to Penelope, I will help you. Not even knowing what that meant, but I said, I will help you. I'm committed to you. I have a contract. Where you go, I will go. Who you are, I support. And really from that day forward, although I didn't have the full understanding, I understood that Penelope is different from what I had expected, but no less brilliant. And then slowly over the years, I started to understand what transgender means, what cisgender means. I started to look at gender in a different way. And Penelope was the impetus for a lot of change in our family, because the freedom that I gave to Penelope to be who you are, I had to then give it to myself and to all of the other children. So this is really, for me, it's not just about understanding trans identities. It is understanding that all identities are unique in some way. And your own identity does not have to match up with anyone else's. There's a long
idea.
journey. Yeah.
Oh, so this conversation is
Did
a
I get you?
precursor.
Did I get you
Yeah,
emotional there?
yeah, it does, because everything that you have done out of, the love of your child. And as a parent, sometimes we don't always stop to just listen to our children. And you stopped and you listen and you learn so much. And especially at that age where Penelope made his declaration at 3 years old, there's many parents that would have dismissed it because they would have said, oh, he's just a baby.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's saying. And the world would have went on. And what harm would that would
The
have
world would
done
have
to
stopped.
Penelope?
The world would have
Exactly.
stopped. If you lose a child, it is a devastation
Mhm.
to the mother, to the father, to the entire family. And all the things you think you cannot endure or cannot get past, when you actually witness the possibility of death in front of you, it is, you can change. And it is not easy for me still to this day to listen to my children before insisting on my opinion. I'm a mother, I'm a 50-year-old woman, I have a dominant personality, and I want them to see the world the way I see it. But when that doesn't work, and a child is going to be lost in this process, then the mothering really kicks in. So how do I mother this person through something I don't understand? How do I make sure that we all make it to the other side? And, it was selfless in that I was trying to understand Penelope, but it is selfish because I was losing myself in that process. Watching your child sort of drift away and pull back, I was losing, it was like breaking myself. So, I think a lot of us as parents have to, it's empathy, but also self-preservation. Our children see the world differently. If we can't move with them, and if we can't adjust our language, and if we can't adjust the way we think to be in the same space with our kids, then what is the family? What is the family?
So, of course, we all know that this conversation is a precursor for Transgender Day of Visibility, which is celebrated every year, March 31st, which is tomorrow. You have been very intentional not to tell Penelope's story.
Yeah.
So how did you intentionally not co-opt the trans experience? Because you make a reference to make sure that his story was not for you to tell. So you started out the book telling us about you, your foundation, and it is not until the middle of the book somewhat that you actually introduce Penelope as he.
Right. Penelope doesn't enter the book for lots of chapters. The story
Yes.
opens with me and my life growing up in New York City, and my Southern grandparents, and my time at Spelman, and my sort of experimental years in New York City, downtown club life, and then my first marriage. Penelope enters down the line, and that was intentional. That was an intentional placement of Penelope in the scheme of things. One thing I wanted to say in that, one point I was making is Penelope is not the issue, nor is he the problem. Trans people are not the issue, nor are they the problem. The issue and the problem is that folks in the dominant position, cis people, wealthy people, our bias. We hold our bias. So I had to talk about my life, where I come from, which I have a lot of respect for my my past and my history and my family, but where I came from gave me a sense of privilege, and that privilege took up too much space, and that too much space gave me blind eyes. So I wanted to tell my story. I think also as a mother, you're never going to tell the story that your children tell. It's always going to be different.
Exactly.
I think I'm a good mom. Just yesterday, somebody thought I was a horrible mom, right? So I'm not going down that road where I try to be the perfect mom. I'm not even close to that. We're struggling all the time in my family. It has not gotten less complicated. It has gotten more complicated. You know, when you realize that things aren't the way you think, life gets more and more complicated, and we've welcomed that complication. But the idea is that you know, Pennell will have to tell his story. All the children will have to tell their stories, and we've seen a lot of people telling other people's stories incorrectly. And I think it's just, you know, we don't have much more time for that. The time now is to tell your story, to share your story in any format that you choose. It could be in a book, it could be in a blog post, it could be at the dinner table. But I don't want to, and my daughter said this, just make sure you do not co-opt the trans experience. And she's a 20-year-old. And I'm very cautious of that.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I'm sorry to just drag this on. I have to say, as a mother, wherever my children are and whoever they are is not far from me. So on a human level, I am not trans, I'm cisgender, but on a human level, my son is not far off from something I understand. And so, like, you know, as I have explored this gender concept of being fluid, I see it more as a we issue. We are, and this is going to be really hard for people to hear, but we are trans, we are cis, we are gay, we are bisexual. Like, I think that the more we think of them versus us, it gets very complicated. And the more, as a mother, I could think of this as we, it got much simpler. And so I don't co-opt the trans experience. And I still say we are a trans family. We are.
Yeah. And speaking of your family, you talk about how you guys sit and have a conversation, and just Penelope's siblings, view of him. Tell us what you think about, tell us about that journey with all of these kids and their different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And how did you raise such resilient children? Because I love the conversations amongst the family, especially the children in the book. How did that come about?
Well, I have 5 kids, and we don't see eye to eye. We don't see eye to eye on race, on gender, on God and faith, on who gets the front seat in the car. Like, we, on real deep issues, we don't see eye to eye. And I was hoping that, you know, as I started to have different ideas on gender, that everyone in the family would just come along with me. But that's very unlikely, right? It just doesn't happen in families. And so what I found is that we need to, and I've experimented with this tactic. It's called labbing it out, right? And I've brought this to the family. And so whenever we have a disagreement, we sit on the floor in a circle. Whoever has the proverbial microphone can speak as long as they want. They can tell us anything that they want. It's inappropriate or appropriate, you lay it on the table. And the rules are simple. You can't interrupt, and it's not a debate. So when your turn comes, you just speak your truth. And I did this because I wanted everyone to get their thoughts out. And then I wanted us to be able to hear the thoughts. And then I wanted us to not get rattled by the different thoughts in my family. So as an example, my older son says, look, Pennell, you're my brother. I love you. I respect you. I will always use the right pronouns. But scientifically speaking, you are female. Scientifically, anatomically, you're female, and we just have to, you know, be rooted in the science. Now, for me, of course, I know that there's science to prove gender nonconformity. And so it's hard for me not to speak up in that moment. But when Pinnell gets the microphone, he says, look, it's not just science. This is who I am. I am here. I've proven it. There's no debate on whether trans people exist. And this is how God has made me.
Mhm.
God has just made me in this way. And then the conversation of God comes up because my scientist, he says, well, God's not proven. So we have explored big concepts. And I'll say we're no closer to agreeing 10 years into this practice. We don't agree still. And so the goal is not to agree. The goal is to talk out these concepts, as foreign as they might be, and to de-escalate them. So to discuss with decorum. So 10 years into this conversation between the two siblings who don't agree, at the end of the conversation, every single time, they say, you know what, you want to just go play some basketball? And then we have dinner, and then we have life, and their opinions have been placed on the table. Their opinions have been valued equally. And then they just do the things in life that families do, eat and play basketball, right?
As a mother, I love it. Now, how would you suggest implementing this in other families? I personally love the idea.
Yeah. Well, it takes time. So you have to carve out in our family, if we have every person, all the children, that's 5 people. If each person speaks for 30 minutes or an hour, that's 5 hours. So this can go on for a long time. But I found that what could have turned into a physical fight amongst brothers has never. And so it is of value for us to carve out that time to lab it out, sit down, and it also, and talk about it and encourage people to put their biggest ideas on the table. And it encourages us to value our own voice and not get rattled when someone has a different voice. It also encourages parents to listen. I want to jump in every single time, and they remind me, Mama,
That's me.
yeah, I have the microphone. You know, it's time consuming, and I found that the time allotted pays off. You know, it really pays off. We are a very diverse family, and that is just, we probably won't change. We will continue to be diverse in our opinions, in our language, in our faith, in how we move through this world. But I do think that we will stay together as a family. And that
Of
to me is
course.
key. But you know, when you're raising gender non-conforming kids, that separates families often.
Yes. Yes. And something that resonated with me as a parent was the sentiment you made about adjusting to grief and loss when our children don't become who we think they are. Tell us about that experience for you as a mother.
Well, I thought that I was raising 2 girls and some boys, and I thought that I was raising feminists. I wanted to have these 2 daughters be bold and smart and go out into the world like Nina Simone, Audre Lorde, you know, Billie Jean King, Toni Morrison, and just change the world. I think we need more bold women in this world, and I was so happy to raise these girls up. And so when I realized that Penelope is not the girl I wanted Penelope to be, I felt that I had failed to raise a proud girl. I thought that I had not instilled pride, and so I was mourning the fact that perhaps I had contributed to a decision that my child was making. You know, when I talk about it now, 10 years later, it all sounds so convoluted because I was not, first of all, this is not a decision that Penelope is making, and it is not a reaction to me or to the world. Penelope is just naturally who he is. So I was definitely like centering it on me. But, you know, I think that there is always going to be a feeling of loss when parents realize that their children are not theirs in that
Yes.
deep sense, and that their children may not be who they want them to be. Um, and so a moment of loss, but I actually I don't feel a mourning of one child and a birth of another. I really consistently can see Penelope's spirit. So when I stop and when I calm myself down, you know, I can see Penelope's spirit as the same energy, Penelope's intellect as the same intellect, Penelope's personality, fluid, the same. He has always been kind, and except for the bouts of when he wasn't being understood, but he's a kind person. He's a studious person. He just graduated valedictorian.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Go Penelope.
yeah, he's a team player. And so I have to really look at the reality, which is what I lost might have been some dresses
Yeah.
and some clothing, and the language. My language has shifted. I don't say she, I say he. What I gained is a child who is confident, who is alive, and who is going to change this world. So yeah, I don't dwell in the mourning. I think I felt maybe had experienced some sadness at that point, but I don't call it mourning anymore.
Yes, because in the book you reference to it as you just let go.
Mhm,
And as parents, that's what we have to learn to do.
mhm.
And I also referenced the book when you say how he changed when you allowed him to dress in the same clothing
Yeah.
as his brothers. And as a reader, when you say he lit up in front of you, to readers, he lit up as well, because my heart just got so warm because I could see this child coming into himself, and everybody is realizing he is who he is. And so I could just imagine.
I mean,
I was so
it was night
happy.
and day. I'm so happy
Yes.
you noticed that it was night and day from, a kid who was turned inward, who was always biting his nails, who was often screaming and crying, who was often talking about the monster coming to get him. And the day that we allowed Penelope to cut hair, and
Yeah.
the day we said, baby, whatever you want to wear is fine, and the day we said, we're going to tell the family who you are, it was like, and
Yes.
I wanted to bottle that moment. And even before I wrote the book, I wrote those memories down. Those were some of the most transformational moments in my life. And I recognize as a parent, we're not here to tell them who they are, but we're here to ask them who they are and then make the environment um, welcoming, like either clear the world out the way or
Mhm.
make the environment right so that your kids can be who they are. And that was like, I found some power in that as a parent, because for a while I was feeling like, what do I do in this with this? I was feeling powerless. But when I realized my job is to support their life, then I could find my value again.
Yeah, it's that being that soft spot for your children to land.
That has been the conversation in I'm laughing only because those exact words have
Hmm.
come up in my family over and over again. Uh, and I tell you, this is the honest truth. I am not the snuggliest mom. There are many years when I am, but there's so much on my plate and perhaps my personality, but like around 9, 10, 11, I'm expecting everyone to be here and be present, to be part of this movement forward.
Yes.
And so I think I want to be clear on when I say, we have to be a soft spot for people to land and we have to mother. Mothering to me is leadership. It's not just the snuggles and the kisses and the affirmations. Those are great things, but to me, mothering is leadership. And so we have to take a look at all the pieces, all the components, the entire family, and say, how do we live together, one cohesive unit? How do I raise up my kids from less than to more than? How do I instill unity in the family? And these are sort of leadership qualities that I think mothers need to have. Um, Along with the soft and snuggly kisses,
Yes.
but really thinking about it as development of your community.
And you being the person that you are, you're everywhere. Everyone knows who you are. So we're looking you up on social media. So I want to turn to now. Recently, NBA star Dwayne Wade has received such harsh criticism about gracing his daughter, Zaya. What do you believe this vocal criticism is rooted? And how can we progress forward?
Fear,
Mhm.
you know, it, I hate this. I hate to see the criticism because behind the scenes, what parents are going through is so hard. And as composed and as clear as Dwayne and Gabrielle are on camera, there are so many moments when we are going through pain and going through confusion. And so I hate to see the criticism. However, the criticism is there. We recognize it. I've read all of my criticisms, thousands and thousands, when they say transgender is a white thing, when they say, Jodie, you're hurting your child, this is child abuse, when they say the devil has infiltrated this family. And so, I think a lot of the, I think a lot of the criticism comes from gaps, cultural gaps, racial gaps, faith gaps, socioeconomic gaps, and it's just fear-based for the most part, lack of information, misinformation. A lot of what I do is I try to give good information, correct information, just so we can get some of the just misinformation off the table. And then the next thing I try to do is share my life so that there's less fear. When you see Penel, my son, it takes you like all of 5 seconds to realize he is not dangerous. He is not deranged. He is not scary or weird. And so the proximity to my life, I think, is important to share. I want you guys to be very close to my life. I want you to see our family. I want you to understand us as humans, because I think that's going to take away some of the criticism that being trans is wrong. The way people used to say being Black is wrong. But this is a normal part of life, normal part of the human experience. So I think proximity to diverse people is going to be really key in getting away from this fear and getting away from the criticism. The more we see this world, the more we can understand how complex it is.
Yes. And even though, like you say, you are very transparent, you bring us all into your life, but how do you navigate these negative comments?
I read them, and that's part of the lab. I don't want to shy away from the realities that are out there. And I don't want them to one day take me by surprise and knock me over. So part of my preparation for this life, being a mother of 5 unique kids, is to be fully aware of what's out there. So I don't dwell in the negativity, but I definitely take a look at it. I digest it. I try to learn from it. And then I move on. I just move on really quickly because I don't need to be tortured, right? And I don't need to be any more sad than, life can make you on its own. So the navigation is, Malcolm Gladwell said 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors. He said, take 10,000 hours to study something and you'll be an expert on it. And so what I study is my family, what I study is gender, what I study is my children, but I also study the gaps. Where are people not connected? And I study that just like I would study anything else that I don't understand, and I don't personalize it.
And so you talk about connecting. Now, for those parents of trans or non-gender, conforming children, what advice and resources would you advise? I know for you and your family, you all attended a camp for transgender children.
So it was really important to me to give life-affirming messages to my children all the time, as parents do. We want to affirm their life. And when I was thinking specifically about Penel's life, I wasn't doing a great job at that. I didn't have any trans friends in my circle. I didn't have any trans books for kids. I didn't have the language. I didn't even know the language to speak. So one year I said to myself, you have to expand your friend group, Jodie. If you have no trans friends, that's going to be a problem, right? Because you're saying that your world does not include your own son. So I told myself, expand your friend group so that it is inclusive of gender nonconforming folks. And I told all my children that they had to expand their friend group so that their friends were inclusive of gender nonconforming kids. And they thought it was strange and awkward that I was insisting on what type of friends they would have going forward.
Yeah.
But it's essential to force yourself to look at your friend group and see what's missing, and then really understand that that is going to be detrimental to you and your family. So to close that gap, I went online and I started looking at all the conferences on gender nonconformity. And if it were 5 hours away, I would drive to that conference, sit in the back room and listen. And I did that for a year just to see what was missing in my life, and to get the information. And then I also found a camp that was for families raising gender nonconforming kids. And I signed the whole family up. And I didn't tell them much information. I just said we're going to camp, um, and it was an experience that everyone actually loved.
Yes.
And it deepened our friendships with other families who have gender nonconforming kids. Penelope was able to see other kids his age who were trans, but also counselors, the head of the school, like really important people who have these beautiful lives and successful lives who are trans. Years later, I think I've been going there for 8 years. Years later, these are my friends, and the family still goes. And so we have, we have a wider friend group and a wider understanding of just life.
And I'm so glad that you guys are still part of that
Mhm.
circle. And in this, there was like an epiphany for other members. I remember in the book you stated about how Joe came alive. He
Oh,
started really being a vocal about his feelings, and he heard from other dads
yeah.
and how they can also support these children. So that was interesting. Can you speak on that?
You're right. So Penel's dad is Ghanaian. He's African, and Penel's dad has always been very involved in his kids' lives. Penel's dad had a hard time
Mhm.
using the word transgender. He had a hard time um, accepting in the beginning that this was not a phase, that this is Penelope's identity. And so we were struggling as husband and wife to figure out what step to take. I wanted to go fast forward. I wanted to join the organizations and go to the camp and write an article for Essence. And dad wanted to slow it down. I wanted to read all the books. Dad wanted to just wait and see. And so that caused tension between us because I thought he wasn't committed. And he thought I was overzealous. And so when we went to camp, and there's a moment when all the parents sit in a circle and we talk and we share, and he just said it so beautifully. He just said that dads have their own way of
Understood.
processing, and that fathers don't always get the same respect because their way is different. And mothers oftentimes see things first just because of the family dynamics. But it is no less important to let the father take his time and to process it, because everyone has a different way of coming into this. And it is important not to lose the child, not to lose the mother, not to lose the father. And it really was beautiful to hear him say that, because and I get emotional now as you see it, it didn't slow me down necessarily, but it opened my heart to realize that when one person in the family transitions, everyone has got to come around. It's a transition of the entire family. And so I have made it a point to really try to keep the family together. And that doesn't mean that we didn't get divorced. Just to put that out there, it is not an easy road. We have since separated, but I tell you, our relationship in many ways is stronger now. We communicate. We are 100% on the same path with our children. So it was a beautiful moment to see him speak so truthfully about the way he was processing it. And it's important. People process things as they are, and the goal is to just keep the process going.
Yes. Okay, so can you share a little bit about the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, which is, of course, we know the nation's largest LGBT organization, and your role within that organization?
Okay, well, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, is globally recognized as the largest LGBT organization, human rights organization. So it is, we have over 3 million members. We have a political side to us where we lobby and we push for pro-equality elected officials. We push for pro-equality presidents, and we help move that political process forward. We are a strong muscle. I'll tell you, we have a PAC and a super PAC, and all of our money a lot of our money goes towards the political movement of liberation and of equality. And then we have on the other side, we've got programs. We've got an HBCU program where we work with HBCUs to help LGBT students on those campuses succeed. We have a faith-based program. We have programs in public schools. We have programs for Black men in the South living with AIDS. We have a program for parents of transgender kids. So we've got this political side and we've got this grassroots side. I didn't know a thing about HRC before any of this. It just wasn't even on my radar. But when I was looking for some support and some power behind what I was trying to accomplish with my family, I found HRC. And so they were an organization that helped me through. They talked me through the process of parenting a trans child. And then in the process, they asked me to be on their board. And then they appointed me chair of the board. So I believe I'm the first Black chair of their board. We have since appointed and hired our first Black president. And this is a big deal because to have a Black Liberian African gay man president of the largest LGBT organization is historical. And for myself, the title of chair of HRC's foundation board is important to me because I know the work in the LGBT community has not always been seen as a Black thing. Mm-hmm. And so right now, you know, a lot of my time is spent with HRC. It's unpaid work, it's volunteer work. And I think it's some of the most rewarding work I do.
Wow. I think that's phenomenal, especially the way they're moving with you,
Yeah.
a Black woman who's raising a trans child. And then, like you said, now they have a LGBTQ representative ahead of the organization. I think we're moving forward.
A Black man, an African, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think, you know, it's like there are these communities of power. And although many of you may or may not know HRC, it is a powerhouse. So when you're talking tens of millions of dollars that go towards the LGBT community, but we're not historically going towards the Black LGBT community or the trans LGBT community, that means that there was definitely room for progress in this organization. And once that progress started to happen, those are real dollars, tens of millions of dollars that go towards now our children, the entire LGBT community, not just some, but really all of the LGBT community. And when you think about it, the LGBT community is in every pocket of life. So if you're not dealing with Southern Black men living with AIDS, if you're not dealing with my Penelope, who's a trans Black boy, you're not dealing with everyone. And so this is about equality for all. And I'm really proud to be with the Human Rights Campaign. Again, it was something that I just didn't know about. And once you start, I think this is for the adults, like young adults, once you start realizing that there are places in this world that you have not explored, it's really exciting to go in there, to take that step and go into these different worlds, and you will find new resources within yourself. I never thought that I would be chair of a board. It's not what I have typically done. I'm much more of a creative. I like to write. I like to listen to music. But chairing the board of a multi-million-dollar organization has challenged me. And I think I got to that board because of my children who challenged me. So I just want to encourage people to sort of boldly assert yourself into places you've never been before. Great things happen when you do that.
And speaking of your kids, I'm just curious to know, what do your children think of all that you're doing? I know they think you're a phenomenal mom.
Oh,
What do they think about the work that you're doing? I think a lot of people would want to know that.
I think like most kids, my kids, you know, don't think much about what I do.
You're
And
just mom.
yeah, I mean, they don't dwell on the adult life. And I think when they have really thought about it and talked about it and expressed it to me, they have expressed this curiosity, like, why do adults make this such a big thing, Mom? Why do you need boardrooms and Zoom conversations and books to talk about how natural and normal Penel is? Like, you guys are just old and weird and you're not getting it. So I think that there is a little bit of like an age, you know, gap that I am understanding. Like this conversation that we're having is what older people are having, but the younger people have surpassed us. So we do seem a little behind the times. I'll say that. I think my kids respect what I do. I've always asked Penel, is it okay to share this story? Is it okay that I get up in front of the stage and mention your name? Is it okay that I go to your school and talk to your teachers? And when he's changed his mind, I have to change courses. So now Penel's in a new school. He's 8th grade. And he said, I love what you do, Mom. Just do not come to my school. don't, don't do it. Um, so I think that, and so that's that. Like there are boundaries that they put up. Sometimes my kids come on stage with me because I want them to experience this. Sometimes my children will do a book reading with me, which they're going to do with Born Ready. But for the most part, I think this is my responsibility as an adult who, has made some shifts to share this with other adults who might be wanting to make some shifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of your book, A Bold World, what does that look like to you? And how do you envision the conversations around gender and identity for this world going forward?
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at what does the world look like, what does a bold world look like? Some of the things that we do in my house, I'd like to see on a larger scale. I'd like to see long form conversation. I'd like to see conflict resolution. I'd like to see bridge building. So I think when we've looked at the world for the last century, it's been top down authority. It's been, driving the highest return on investment. So managing and insisting on the highest return from your children, from your coworkers, from your land. And I'd like to see more collaboration, more so than domination. I'd like to see more, instead of top down, more sort of community based work. I think leadership is going to have to take a turn, and that means leadership in the home, but also leadership outside of the home. I think there's going to be a lot more feminine energy. And I don't mean that biologically. I mean, if there's yin and yang energy, and we've gone with the dominant masculine approach of authority, I think there's going to be a feminine approach coming in. I think there's going to be a need for mothering outside of just mothering in the home, mothering in the boardroom, mothering in politics, mothering of the land. Really, sort of this understanding of looking at all the parts, understanding how we can keep us together, understanding how we can have health all around. So mothering, I think, I honestly think mothering is going to be an evergreen concept from this point forward. We have done too much damage. And now we need some unity. We need some emoja.
This needs to be something that we all participate in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. Like I said, collaboration. But when you talk about activism, it's really activism for all. So when I think, okay, what did I learn about my transgender son, and then also taking that message and applying it, don't stop there, applying it everywhere. So when Penelope needed me, I had to be mentally flexible and learn. And when my other son needed me, and he said, Mama, you don't even get me. All you know is Penel and being transgender, but do you see me? I had to use that flexibility around him too. So I think you're right. I think one of the next things that we're going to really have to concentrate on is connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, connecting the dots.
Collaboration is very important when you're trying to make a change. And like you said, that's the only way it's going to work. It has to be a concerted effort.
Yeah, and that means that straight folks and queer folks are going to have to work together. Straight folks are going to have to collaborate with the queer community. They can't just fix it on their own. Like, this is about collaboration. Parents are going to have to collaborate with children. Cis people are going to have to collaborate with trans people. And it is the responsibility of the dominant culture to bridge the gap. So I took that responsibility on. I have a privilege being a cisgender woman, and it was my responsibility to collaborate, to bridge the gap between my world and the trans world. And I think we have to do that over and over and over again. Collaboration is key. How are we going to get here without, I mean, the world is too diverse. So there has to be collaboration across the diversities.
Yeah. So everyone, if you have any questions, I mean, please feel free to just kind of write it in the chat or unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment. This has been a good dialogue.
It has been. I hope that I tend to go all over the place. I tend to veer off. But I hope I made it. I hope I was clear in that. I think the story or what I've learned from Pinnell has given me new verve in life, but it is an ongoing process. It just reminded me, Pinnell reminded me that there's so much in this life that we don't know. And it is the experience, it is all in the experience. You have to keep experiencing life. You can't just be the 50-year-old mom. You can't just be, going down the same path over and over again. Because as we've noticed during COVID, it is not just about taking the same path. At some point, life will give you a curveball, life will give you a sinkhole, and you're going to have to figure out a way out. And what I've, and so I think, God bless, my sinkhole was Pinnell. It took me out of my regular routine and it jarred me, and I had to accept and see life differently. And so I just hope that people, understand that this is a natural part of life when you realize it's not what you thought.
Yeah. And I think we have a question, Jodie. We have a question from George. George, would you unmute?
Oh, great. What was my question? I had lots of comments. This is Chip. Jodie, this is Chip. All right. Who's George?
Oh, it says George has a question in the chat, so I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Chip.
How you doing? Great. No, I just want to thank you. Miss Jodie Patterson and I went to college together. I was at Morehouse and she was at Spelman.
Oh, wow.
And got to see her. I remember her freshman year just showing out on that freshman fashion show and just walking all over the place. It was just beautiful to see that great energy. But I also think you got to talk about your bohemian lifestyle. I think it's just amazing. You got to tell people, you were an acrobat, am I right? Or what was that in the circus? You got to just share some of that.
So I have always had this lifestyle that was not straight and narrow. I mean, some of it was traditional. I went to a very traditional school, which is Spelman. I went to a very traditional high school for all girls. But I've always explored, and my parents always pushed me to explore. So I was an acrobat in the Big Apple Circus. And for a long time, I didn't even have that on my resume. It's on my resume now. I was in fashion. I was in beauty. I had like 9 different careers, literally. But that was a part of me, as a New Yorker. It was a part of me coming from parents who said, you are here to explore and you are here to challenge the status quo. So I never had this sense that I had to be one thing. But what's really interesting, even about this bohemian lifestyle, growing up in New York City and really being a part of downtown New York City culture and music and the art life, I still wasn't ready. I was still confused by my own child's form of change. Like I was all about change, I thought, right? I was all about experimenting, but when my kid brought his form of change, it stopped me in my tracks. And, so that was just something that I noticed, that we oftentimes give our own selves freedom, but then we don't want to give other people freedom.
Right. You're the first young woman I saw when I think you were 17 and I was 7. You had a nose ring. I was like, she's cool.
Oh, and remember when this is something that sounds so silly now, but at Spelman, when we were there, was it 30 years ago?
Yes.
I cut all my hair off.
Yes.
Into a pixie. Yep. And people were like, what did you do to your hair? Yes. I said, I just cut it. Well, why? Is everything okay? So these small things at the time, cultural norms.
Yes.
Cultural norms are just a part of life, but I think it's important for us to think about how to break through cultural norms and how to detach yourself from cultural norms for a moment, even, because in the breaking of the norm, you will find something else, some other aspect of you, some other aspect of life. So sometimes just the simple act of cutting your hair on Spelman's campus when hair meant a lot.
In the 80s, of course.
Yeah, a lot, right? And it prepared me on some level for when Penel said, Mama, cut my hair off. I want a mohawk like Papa's.
Yeah.
Or when Penel said, stop saying she and say he, please. We have to experience the cutting of cultural norms so that we're ready for the shift of life. Because I guarantee you, life is not just one path. It really isn't.
And just the last thing I got to say is that, I teach at Georgia State, and I've been sharing your articles for 4 years. I've been sharing your articles, and the students love them. And I think this year I begged you to come to my class, and I think you jumped in, and the kids are like, did Miss Patterson just show up in my class? They like fainted because I didn't tell them that. But I just want to say that your voice really pushed them to have discussions with their own parents about relationship and what is love. And the push that really they all said was about, it was your job to push every boundary out the way to make your kids successful. And I think that was the biggest thing that they all took away about just radical parenting. You know what I mean? That's what it is.
There we go.
What am I? Go ahead. Keep on going. Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, we have forgotten to talk about that title of radical parenting, because oftentimes we think of parenting as task mastering and getting through the day. And when something like this comes in and rocks your world as a parent, you have to redefine sometimes the role of parenting. And what I've come up with is that it is radical parenting. In the same way that my community and our community had radical civil rights movement, we are talking about getting our kids through a crisis. And the crisis is this divide where they see themselves as one thing and we see them as something else. The language isn't connecting, but how as parents do we get our children to the other side? This is radical parenting, and you don't see it in the books. You won't experience it in the books. Where you'll understand the concept of radical parenting is when you look at James Baldwin, when you look at Toni Morrison, when you look at Angela Davis, when you look at these other radical thinkers. How do we transform? How do we break norms? And then you apply that to parenting. And this is what I meant when I said it's not always the snuggles and the hugs and kisses. That is good. That is a part of it. But the bigger part that we need right now is this radical parenting approach that looks at this as nothing to be taken lightly. Because I almost lost, something really important. And that would have just broken the family. And so there is no moderate way to save a life. It's radical. And there's no moderate way to save a family that is crumbling in this environment where there's trans violence. There's violence against trans people. 109 were murdered, I think, last year globally. There's violence against Black boys and Black girls. There is an attack on the Black family. That requires a radical approach to parenting, leadership, keeping the family together, moving us to the other side. Thank you for bringing that up, Chip.
And Jodie, it's a question. We talk about making this change, and then we talk about how we need everyone to be inclusive, and we're talking about the dominant groups. Now, someone would like to know that it is important to make that change, that it falls on the dominant group. But what if members of the dominant group aren't willing to become part of that conversation?
Not everyone is. That is just a fact. Not everyone is going to be willing to have a conversation or be a scholar or even just be open to hearing something new. But I guarantee you there is somebody in that group that will. And I'm just looking for one person at a time. So in my family, I'll give you an example. The children's grandfather is from Ghana. And when he was alive, he was a very conservative Ghanaian, borderlining on sexist. He really believed that men and women were different. And so I was concerned that he wasn't going to really understand Penelope as he. And he definitely wasn't going to understand the word transgender or that gender was fluid. And so when he came to live with us, I had to work this idea of change one person at a time. I had to start with Grandpa G and figure out a way for him to live in our house and for Penelope to live in our house and for us to be cohesive. And we broke it down really simply. We said, Grandpa G, can you just change your language and say he instead of she? And I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it did, because he was a man of many languages and he understood language is not always gendered. So in his language of Twi, he did not use gender pronouns. So when he said yes, and he's from that point forward, he called Penel he, and they spent a life together. For the rest of Dr. G's life, they were living together and happily in love with each other, the grandpa and the grandson. I think it's not that everyone in the dominant culture is going to want to be a part of the conversation, but there's one person, might be a grandpa, it might be a principal. Penelope's principal at his school was that one person I leaned on for change. So I think it's not about shifting the world. At first, it's about cleaning up your house. Who near you? Who's that one person near you that would be open to having that conversation? Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, this conversation has been just wonderful. I have enjoyed it, and I'm pretty sure the participants have as well. I just want to make sure we get any last comments. I'm looking in the chat.
Mm-hmm. You know, the more I think about it, it's like it's a scary step to take to advocate for what your community doesn't see as important. So, you know, I always go back to what I know, and my grandparents were civil rights activists, but that's what their community saw value in. So although the world at large didn't understand Black justice, our community of Black folks knew it. And so when you were a civil rights activist, you felt all the power in the world. You felt the moral obligation to continue because you knew it was right. As a Black mom of a trans person, there was no community that said, you're right, Jodie. There was no community that said, we've got you, we're here for you, this is about justice for all. It was sort of like me and my computer for a long time. And so I think we have to take bold steps, even when our immediate community does not support the change that we know is important. I think we have to find a few people that can help us along the way. And those few people that can help us along the way might be outside of your main community. One of the reasons why I went to the Human Rights Campaign, which is not a Black community, is because I needed help.
Yes.
So I am still very attached to my Black community. It is primarily my culture, but I had to widen my friend group once again to find people who were speaking this language of gender diversity. So it's going to be difficult for us to go outside of whatever communities we're in. I don't have the full view of this community that I'm speaking with, but your community might be religious based or culturally based or racially based. But sometimes we're going to have to go out of that community to find support for the new way we're trying to approach life, right? For the new language we're trying to develop. And that's hard, but I think it's important for us.
Is someone else? I think I heard someone else. Okay. That the resources. I think you're right. It is good to find resources in your community, but when they're not there, you have no other choice but to branch out and find those services that you need. Yeah. Jodie, this conversation has been very valuable, especially with tomorrow, you know, being Trans Visibility Day. We want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with us.
I want to say thank you. And I want to close by saying that it is so important it's radical to listen to a mom speak about what I've learned from my home. I didn't really talk much about work, talk more about what I've learned in my home. I think it's radical for people to listen to a mother and to bring that wisdom to the world, right? So thank you for having me talk about mothering. And I also think that it's important, if you start to Google my family, if you see Penel's picture, my children's picture, people have found it very easy to like Penel. And it's very easy to, he's been on billboards, in Gap campaigns, and in lots of magazines. But I also ask us to just look around our communities. There are a lot of trans people that we don't think are cute, that we have not uplifted, that we find scary, that we have said, these are dangerous people. And I want to try to have that same compassion. Maybe Penel can open up that compassion for you, my son, but let's extend that compassion to the trans community, because there's so many people that we have dismissed. And the compassion that we need to have perhaps can be jump-started by reading my book or looking at the videos of my family. But this is a bigger issue that has become a global problem.
Yes.
And so when we think of Trans Visibility Day, just sort of open up your hearts to the millions of people who are trans identified.
Thank you, Jodie. So well said. And I would encourage the participants that we will continue to have great dialogue here at the Multicultural Center. We are open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5:15. Thank you. William, is there anything you would like to say?
Just want to let the folks know who are on that we do have another Storytellers event tomorrow from 4 to 5:15, excuse me, with Cameron McCullough. And we also have our Trans Day of Visibility event keynote from 12 to 2 with Messiah Wade.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much, Jodie. We so appreciate it. And that is her book, The Bold World, a memoir of family and transformation. And I would recommend that everyone read it. It is a phenomenal read.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.